Hello and welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Fulbrighters, where we bring you some of the best minds from all over Pakistan who are all Fulbrighters. What a coincidence. And a lot of you have probably seen the ads that she's produced, but now it's time to see the person behind those ads. So Faryal Ali, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Good. She's the creative manager at BBTO Lahore and she's a Fulbright from Northwestern University. So let me ask the first question that most people probably think. Why are Indian ads so much better? Why are their ads better than ours?
I I think that we're getting there gradually. We do have a lot of creativity within the Pakistani advertising industry, but I think it's also on the clients because I feel like the clients need to place their trust in the Pakistani advertising agencies. There's been a lot of times that we actually just make adapts from the Indian versions just with
Mm.
local talent. And we're not, as an agency person, I'm definitely not in favor of that. But there is this perception, even with the brand managers and the brand side, that Indian ads are better. And I think unless you give a chance to the younger generation to actually come up with cool creatives, that won't really change.
Is it also that they've become risk averse? Because even growing up, a lot of our ads were creative or were doing well. Even if I think back at the cricket soda ads, they were a lot better now. But at least when I was growing up, or is it just this me being a boomer being like things were so much better during my generation?
I just generally think that things have gotten better also. There have been some amazing ads out in the industry. There was this ad by Amreli Steels that was really heartwarming as well. I do think that brands themselves have become a bit more risk averse. Also, there is this hesitance and reluctance in putting the trust of the brand in the younger generation. There are so many people on the agency side who have progressed in the agency really really quickly, and they have very sharp minds, very brilliant minds that will resonate with today's generation, but brand managers don't essentially give them a chance. There are very few of those on the client side that are open to us pitching ideas and sort of letting us be. So I think there's this trust issue that is very prevalent in our industry as of now. But I mean, our population is young, but at the same time, the space is not being created for younger people to bring up their ideas.
What do you think an ad should do? So if you're somebody who's in the ad agency or somebody who's interested in joining the creative agency, what do you think an ad should do?
So I think just in the sense of shareability or talkability, an ad could be three things. It could be funny. A humorous ad is always a win. It could be something that stirs up an emotion, whether that's anger or that's sadness. It could be either that. It could even be some sort of heartwarming emotion that is stirred up once you watch the ad, or it could straight up be informational. So, an ad that educates you or brings a new fact to light, maybe a new way to eat a burger, for instance. That's the kind of ad that would have that talkability. So for me, it's always like these three things that need to be checked off in order for an ad to be good.
Yeah, but you have to be a little careful in Pakistan, right? If that emotion is anger, that
Gee.
ad might be taken off the air altogether.
Yeah, that's actually very true. But sometimes I feel like ads do need to be a bit provocative. If especially you're making sort of like a big statement, there needs to be that shock value that needs to be brought up. There have been ads out there. We have done a lot of campaigns, not for commercial brands, but for non-commercial brands like UN Women, where sometimes you need to stir up an emotion. It could be anger that you feel that why is this happening, or it could be something that really touches you. So you're right. Sometimes it can go either way. You have to be careful and calculate that properly, but it's still important to create that sort of an emotion.
Do you think that censorship is playing a role in the ad agency and in the ad world as well?
Yes, it definitely is playing a role. I think every time we are doing our brainstorms, there are so many things that we need to be mindful of. There are so many issues that we need to be mindful of. Like, let's say, take a very basic example. If you're making an ad for sanitary pads, there are so many things you can and cannot say. And that really limits the creative mind. From that perspective, I think that the Indian censorship board is still much better because they do allow some leverage to creatives and to brands to actually be. I mean, AMV BBDO, it's a global ad agency. They did an amazing campaign called Womb Stories, and they talked about the cramps that women go through. That is a narrative that we definitely can't tell in Pakistan because you are afraid of even talking about such things in public, which is really unfortunate.
So even this notion that we have that whatever the product, whatever you want to advertise, just have people dancing, and somehow at the end you find out what the product was for. Is that just
So
creators
I
being lazy? Is that they're playing safe? What? Why do we see a million of these
personally,
ads?
I can speak for the whole industry, but personally, I think, especially in my agency, we don't essentially stand by the dancing and the in the end the brand and the tagline comes. We're not essentially in favor of that, primarily because if you take the product out of the ad, you can never tell
Hmm.
what this ad is about. So for us it is definitely important that you're giving out an interesting message. It could be funny, it could be humorous. I agree with you. There are a lot of ads out there which are essentially just a song and a dance and a popular celebrity, but I think at the same time you have to know your consumer as well. If your consumer is attracted to a big face, if they will buy, let's say, a cell phone because a celebrity is selling it, they will probably buy it. So you also have to study the consumer, and it's a bit of both, right? You need to know what your consumer demands, what your consumer likes, what they're interested in, and then you produce an ad. So if dancing is what gets through to them, maybe you have to do that sometimes. But I still think that you need to at least start by creating an impact. You need to make sure that they adapt step by step. So we're getting there, but it's still a slow process, albeit it's steady.
What do you think COVID, how did COVID impact the industry? One would assume that due to COVID, ads would go lean and there would be minimal production and messaging and impact would be a lot more focused on. But from the ads that I see, I don't see any difference. We're still producing ads with these 5 crore budgets, but probably paid 15 rupees to somebody to write the script for the ad.
No, no, it's that's not the case entirely. But we have shot a couple of ads in COVID. I personally have attended at least 4 to 5 different shoots for different brands during COVID. So, in fact, I got back from my Fulbright in, I think, February last year, and I rejoined this agency. I used to work here before as well, and I rejoined them. So we straight up went to the pandemic, and everything shifted to digital. So there was this sudden demand for creating content on digital. So whether it has to do with a DVC, with an animated video or something of that sort, there was that initial bump of fear, but eventually we did go back to creating ads. I mean, if you just imagine a set, it's everybody on the set is wearing two masks and just yelling, and then everybody puts their mask down, everyone is eating, and obviously that's not the safest environment, but the budgets are still there and the communication is still happening. In fact, I think there's an interesting debate that is happening during these ads. There's a lot of companies which ask us, do you think we should put masks on the actors for this ad? So our response is always that no, because it doesn't really make sense. You can take the precautions and shoot it properly, but putting masks on these actors where everybody knows this is just a fantastical world won't really change anything. People know this is an ad and this is a fake world. So I think they will be used to the fact that COVID is not happening on the set.
Sure, but I mean, it probably still helps with the messaging. Since you brought it up, how much do you think brands should play a social responsibility? Because sometimes that can also get a bit sketchy, like that Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad. I'm sure Pepsi thought they were doing
Very
this
offended.
social service, but it turned out to be so tone deaf.
Yeah, so I think that's where the agency comes in. As for the Pepsi example, I think they had an in-house creative team. But I think from that perspective, if you have an outside agency that can really look at things from separating themselves from the brand perspective and then thinking of a creative, that helps. At least it brings in fresh perspective. At the same time, that ad was definitely very tone deaf. Don't know what went wrong there, but there have also been instances in Pakistan where things go wrong. This Kanoli incident is a prime example. But it's very important for brands to then be intentional. And if they've genuinely made a mistake, it's important to put that apology out there in a very authentic way. Otherwise, it just looks like window dressing. It's not that great. Sorry, go
But
on.
I mean, the apology comes in when they realize there's a mistake, right? There's so many ads. For instance, the notion that it'll always be the woman in the cooking oil in the kitchen. That's not something they even
Hmm.
realize is wrong. That's not messaging that they even realize is problematic. Recently, there was this washing machine which made a domestic violence joke. If they're not even going to realize that there's a problem
Yeah.
in the ad, where how will we come to a stage where they're apologizing and owning up?
And there's actually a flip side to that. Whatever you're saying, there have been moments when creative agencies pitch a very feminist campaign, and the response is that it's too feminist, it won't resonate with the masses. So the idea is to get the public used to a certain message in a very safe way, in a very slow and steady sort of fashion. For instance, we did this one ad on floor cleaning. So we were marketing a product which was essentially a floor cleaner, and the entire ad was initially thought around a woman cleaning the floor for her kids, and we just made a slight change to that instead of a woman, let's show a man. So it's these small changes that you have to plug and play for the audience to eventually get used to it.
I mean,
So it's a long way.
but even when brands do jump upon these social movements, there's also criticism, right? For instance, currently the BLM
Exactly.
movement, brands have come on board, but even if the messaging of the ad is perfect and the agency has done a stellar job, just the association of the brand trying to get clicks and virality of a social movement, that's problematic to begin with.
It is. I mean, Kashmir Day is a prime example. There have been requests from brands to create something for Kashmir Day when their brand has absolutely no relevance to it. So it's very important to be intentional with your communication. If your brand has some sort of a relevance to a certain cause, then by all means they should go for it. And it shouldn't just be words or fluffy C-suite messages. It should be something that's followed up with actual action. So if you're vouching for some sort of a movement, then perhaps create a fund that helps people. So it needs to be a tangible change. It can't just be a vocal statement.
And in Pakistan, there's been a lot of discussion around this rebranding that has happened, and they've jumped on the feminist bandwagon, whereas maybe historically they have contributed to creating certain stereotypes which have hurt women and people in general. So just by changing a name and having a semantic change, now they're this feminist idealization. What are your thoughts about that?
I think in that case, I do think that it could come across as performative because it's really important to be authentic. Like I mentioned, this is a brand that has done years of damage. There are so many issues in our society, and I think this brand was actually a product of those issues. But
Hmm.
instead of addressing them, they sort of rebranded this entire name of their brand, said brand. But at the same time, while the intention might be good, again, this should have been addressed properly. So they can't just change the name and, in fact, have a very, light skinned woman presented in that ad. They should probably make a real statement. I mean, there are moments in our Pakistani dramas where brown skinned women aren't very popular. There's people who still have white fair skin and then they're projected into ads. Kabhi kabhi, there are instances when you have these pale women and in fact their complexion is darkened for the particular drama, but rather just use somebody who has that natural complexion. So it could come across as inauthentic, but I think this is where brands need to address the baggage. For instance, if I was a consumer for this product and if I had been affected by it personally or emotionally, I would have loved to see an actual change, them addressing the actual issue that, oh, for many years, this is something that we've been doing wrong, and then make that change. Which it's sometimes seems a bit fluffy to just change the name and all is good and done.
I mean, it's probably impossible for the brand to do that because that is what the brand is. I mean,
Yeah,
unless they
yeah.
stop producing it and the holding company decides that we're not going to make this anymore. But that's literally what the brand is.
Yeah. So in such cases, it really is, I think, dependent on the brand themselves if they do want to take up such a bold statement or not. But it is also important to put out good, important messages out there. I mean, years of damage will not be reversed by a name change. So that's that.
So, as somebody who's also studied law, there might be a murderer who might come to you and you will need to defend that
Oh,
person. So, if a brand comes to you and you know they're only doing this for performative reasons and you know that they have a terrible history, as an agency, what do you do? How do you improve their image? Because that's the work that you do.
and I think that happens to pretty much every agency at some point, and I think this is where it's important to pick your battles. In some cases, let's say if this said brand is paying the agency a lot of money, you can try your best. You can try to change some part of it, but you definitely cannot change the entire ethos of the brand. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, these are small steps that need to be taken. Like maybe plugging in a man instead of a woman in a domestic scenario, or maybe putting a woman in a working situation instead of a domestic scenario. These are small steps that can be taken, because we have to realize that at the end of the day, as agencies, we are working towards a company's bottom line. We have to meet their certain goals, whether they're associated with sales or with greater market penetration. That's what we're working for at the end of the day. But I think with my agency, we sort of balance it out with a couple of pro bono campaigns that we do. So this is where we try to drive social change and actually do real stuff, partnering with charitable organizations or NGOs. So we have to maintain a healthy balance.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're dealing with capitalist institutions, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the branding may be, they may turn around and be like, this is how many we've sold. If this is how bad our imaging is and how we're hurting the society, this is what the demand is. And even if we take that product out, there probably gazillion such products in the market because the demand exists.
Yeah, so I think that's where the small changes come into play. One thing at a time, plugging and playing with different characters. Maybe not going with somebody who's a misogynist in the industry. Maybe not going with such an actor would be a small change. So something like that, yeah.
It would be much bigger than a small change. I think we're at that stage where cancel culture does not exist even. I mean, there could commit crimes, not just be a misogynist and still be a youth star. But that's a debate for some other
I love
time.
it.
Contentious discussion that we have. Do you
Yes.
recommend that to brands though? Or I mean, especially in certain cases in Pakistan, and since I also make a lot of digital content, what brands tend to do is this: they say both sides are controversial, so let's not engage with both sides. Whereas that really diminishes somebody who's standing up for social justice and somebody who's actually the perpetrator of a crime.
I think that really depends. We have come across with some brands who openly would pick a side if that really resonates with them. I have personally worked with a brand who did pick a side, and they were openly supportive of that. So I think it really depends on how bold the brand is willing to go. But at the same time, it's risky territory, and not everybody is willing to jump into lava, I would say.
I mean, it also depends on how big the brand is, right? For instance, even the US,
Yeah,
when elections were happening, and they said these are the most seminal elections that have ever existed. Brands were like, even Republicans buy our products, or even Democrats buy our products. So we're not
yeah,
going to take
yeah,
a political stance.
yeah, absolutely.
In terms of digital marketing, do you think brands are now realizing the value of digital marketing? Because again, as somebody who makes content, years ago I've been having these battles where they'll want the same ad, but if the same ad shot the same way with the same people runs on TV, the budget is 2 crores. But if the same ad with the same people
Yes.
using the same cameras is shot and run on Facebook, the budget is 10 lakhs. And you're like, it's the same video that you'll get.
And I think the difference here is that with digital, there's better metrics for measurement as well. So it does allow for a greater return. But I think brands are just very slow to maybe learn about this. I think COVID was, I mean, it was the worst thing to happen to us, but it was also sort of a driving change for brands to realize how important digital is. I work in the digital sector, and I think my life pretty much ended when COVID happened, because digital content was happening day and night. All the brands wanted to jump the wagon. They wanted to create digital content, even if it was basic posts or basic like carousel ads or canvas ads. They wanted us to explore different ad formats. We had so many trainings which were all about making content on digital. TikTok literally blows everything up. And brands are also gradually adapting to TikTok, because even though we have a lot of localized content, there is so much diversity, and it's a really good medium to get to the masses.
Yes,
So yeah, I
even
think
even that's a hard battle to have with brands, right? Some of these elite brands that I've had discussions with, if I mention
yes.
TikTok, they walk me out of the room without realizing the value of TikTok, because the perception of TikTok in Pakistan is cheap, and certain brands
Yeah,
don't
I
want to
think
promote it.
that's true actually. But I think this is where, as marketeers or as creatives, our job comes in. We have to obviously convince them. It's a long battle where we have to make reports and inform them about the stats and the reach, and how we can engage people through TikTok. But brands are gradually adapting towards it, and pretty much, like, I think around 5 6 brands that I personally work with are completely okay with us proposing challenges on TikTok and working with different TikTokers to create content. and even the numbers sort of speak for themselves, and I think that's then the driving force.
Even though I think the TikTok numbers are not very authentic.
They are not very authentic. You are absolutely right. There are measurement issues, especially because a lot of features don't even work in Pakistan right now.
Hmm.
But we're getting there slowly and gradually. I think that's my pet line as a marketeer. We're getting there.
It's that old school branding mentality the brands still have, right? Like to be associated with Amira Khan comes with its own prestige. But even
Yes.
if a TikToker may have more likes, there's a TikToker who has almost as many followers as Imran Khan has on Twitter, but they wouldn't want to be associated with that person because the association of TikTok comes with that idea that it's cringe.
Yeah, it's cringe. It's the brand image, and I think it also depends what kind of brand we're talking about. Some brands are completely okay with it.
Mhm.
I mean, just on a very basic level, let's say we have a cookie brand, they wouldn't have a lot of reservations coming onto TikTok because again, it's just a cookie. Everybody's going to be consuming it. But at the same time, if it's a premium product, then they wouldn't want it to be on TikTok because I think that there is this huge divide that the TikTok users have versus other users. And but at the same time, I mean, everything is being made for mobile. Everything is being made for vertical. Initially, there was this huge argument that you have to create content for sound off, but TikTok really destroyed that. So I think, sorry. So I think that
You're looking
really,
at too
really
many
helped.
alien videos these days. Tic Tac
Yeah,
is that alien
yeah,
craft.
yeah, yeah. I saw that. That's actually the one that
Maybe
stuck in
that's
my
what's
head.
on your mind.
Yeah, and I think I actually love their content as well, and I think those are the kind of content creators that brands need to sort of start working with, because they will really turn your product around.
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, especially in Pakistan, people only see the value when the value has been lost. Whether it be Facebook, for instance, people who were making content for Facebook 5 years ago got a lot more bang for their buck as opposed to people who are plugging in money to Facebook now. Same thing with
Yeah,
Instagram, same thing with TikTok. Maybe in 5 years, when TikTok is charging millions for you to boost your ad on TikTok, people will be like,
yeah,
I want to be on TikTok. Whereas right now, $1 would go the most on TikTok or LinkedIn as opposed to
absolutely.
Instagram and Facebook, where these markets are saturated. I'm talking too much. So Faryal, you tell me what are
No,
what
no.
are the future of digital marketing? What is the future? Where do we put our money?
I think right now Pakistan is definitely way, way behind. When I was in the US, I interned with this company as their in-house creative,
Mhm.
and the way they're doing marketing versus us doing marketing, it's actually poles apart. So most of their efforts are actually focused on digital versus in Pakistan, where TV is still consumed by the masses, TV and print. Print is still somewhat debatable, but TV is the primary medium that you have to connect to the masses with. But at the same time, I think the pandemic itself was the biggest example of why brands should put their money into digital, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whether it's WeTransfer backgrounds, for example. These are the places that have really good content potential. It's sort of tricky with Facebook because recently there have been conversations on data and where Facebook stands, and there have been bans within brands where you can't really post content on Facebook owned companies.
Mhm.
So that is still tricky territory, but again, video content is the best way to pool all your resources in, whether it's YouTube Wogons or pre-rolls, or I think TikTok personally is definitely the future. As of now, I believe that, but we'll see in 2 years.
And for everybody who's interested in branding and advertising is listening to this podcast, if you're looking for digital content creators, there are many really funny, great digital content creators who are Fulbright scholars who will have an ethic with what they do. So please, shehzad
And
at gmail
and
dot
I
com.
think with like content creators, even if you're plugging in your brand, it's shameless. Like you will see somebody casually, bicycling and then pulling out a juice box. It seems natural because they're in their natural element. Whereas this done through a popular celebrity, I mean, if Myra Khan does that, everybody knows it's fake. But with that, at least there's this humor value that's created. So I think brands should really start exploring that side of marketing.
And content creators also need to have a bit more self-respect. A lot of times
Yeah,
watched
absolutely.
movies and I'm like, why did I pay 500 rupees to watch a 90-minute ad for this cola company? Whereas if you watch James Bond, maybe Rolex would or an Aston Martin would come in for 5 seconds and they get paid a lot more. So there's a way
Yeah,
to plug in your content and there's a way to be shameless about it.
exactly, exactly.
Since you already mentioned the US, how did your Fulbright experience in studying Northwestern University educate the work that you're doing, especially since you were already at the agency and then you came and rejoined? What do you think Fulbright added to your work? Like,
So I think there was a lot of personal growth in the sense that I also completed an internship period in the US. It was a part of my course and it was counted for credit. So I spent 3 months in Arizona in the dry heat over there, working for a waste management company. And the main role that I had was to create content for them. We had to come up with big ideas. I think the biggest difference that I noticed over there versus here in Pakistan is that they don't care how old you are. They don't care if you look young, which is something that I have received a lot ever since I've come back. Oh, you look really young. Every time my work is out there without my face, it's great. But every time my face comes up, oh, she's just a kid. I think that is the mentality that is very different here in Pakistan versus US. Over there, the chief marketing officer would be sitting down with interns, graduate interns, and listening to their entire plan. Two of our ideas that we pitched actually got executed over 3 months.
nice.
So the pace at which they're working and the trust which they place in their people, even if they're just interns, it's magnificent. Versus over here in Pakistan, you have to perhaps spend 17 years in the industry to get to that level. So I think from the brand's point of view, and even like the agency mavericks who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years, need to start giving young people a chance. I think that's probably the biggest difference I noticed. In terms of my learnings, I definitely just felt that content over there is more focused towards digital. Even the way influencer marketing is done, it's very, I would say that it's not as shameless as it is here. Over here, influencers just post content. I mean, there is no creativity involved in the way they're pitching their content. It just says paid post at the top, which kind of kills the purpose of it. So I think the way that it's done over there is very, very different versus how it's being done here. You pay so much money to an influencer to just post a picture of your product, which doesn't really tell people anything. I think influencers need to be intentional with their content as well. Talk about the benefits of this product. Talk about if you're genuinely enjoying it or genuinely using it. There's very few influencers who are doing it in an authentic way. So I think these are just tiny things that I picked up on while I was there. I had this really cool professor who had worked for around 20 years in Google, and he would bring really cool insights to the classroom. There was a lot of practical work involved. We pretty much only did case studies. So that is something that really helped me when I'm tracking a creative brief over here in Pakistan now. So my skills earlier versus my skills now, there's definitely a huge difference in whatever I learned. The very basic thing that I picked up is that usually, whenever we're cracking a brief, we need to be acquainted with the key objective or the business objective from a brand side. But over here, I've occasionally come across business managers or brand managers who don't really know what their business objective is. They will just say, we want awareness. Those aren't very tangible or measurable objectives for our teams to work towards. So this is where the gap can be bridged between agency and client side.
Absolutely. I think authenticity is the most important word. Even if you have somebody like Casey Neistat, if he's going to put in an ad, he literally say, now this is an ad, but this is something I use. He's not going to advertise something that he doesn't use. Whereas influencers here also need to realize that who you are
Yeah.
and what product makes sense for you to advertise. The contentious product that we mentioned, they approached me and I said no because I was like, this doesn't gel with me. And now I regret not taking the money. So please, if you're listening, come back. I miss you.
They're not coming back.
Please, Jack. Jack. Thank you for your insights, and I hope brands and creators who are listening will pay heed to this. And for prospective Fulbright students, I think it's also a great industry. What specifically was your master's in?
So my program was in integrated marketing communications, and there are like a couple of concentrations that you guys can choose. So there's different programs. So mine was marketing technology and digital marketing, which was fantastic.
Yeah, and
But
and,
yeah,
and it, like Faryal mentioned, there so much work being done and not enough people who know how to do it. So for people who are doing
Hmm.
communication programs and are interested, please look that up, and we will be back again next week with another Fulbrighter sharing their insights, their Google insights with all of you, and on this platform that's trying to steal your data. So log off and go home. Thank you, Faryal. Thank you
Thank
everyone for
you.
listening. Take care. Bye
Take
bye.
care.